In this video, we're going to talk about 9.2 Objective 2, where we determine whether claims about hypothesis tests for population means make sense. So question 1 asks us to decide whether the statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false. In hypothesis tests, if the significance level is 0.01, then the p-value is also 0.01. No, that's not true. That doesn't make sense. So the p-value is determined by the test statistic. The significance level is determined by the critical z-value. They're different z-values. They're not the same thing. So this is C. Significance level and the p-value represent different components of the hypothesis test and are generally not the same. It's very, very strange to have a hypothesis test where your test statistic comes out on the line for your critical z-value, where you get the same z-value for your test statistic as your critical z-value. It can happen, but it's very strange when it happens. Determine whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false, and explain clearly. In testing a claim about a population mean, if the standard score of the sample mean is z equals 0, there's not sufficient sample evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. That does make sense because you're right on top of the mean value. You're not going to be anywhere close to either of the tails. To reject the null hypothesis, you would fail to reject the null hypothesis. So this is D. The statement makes sense. A standard score of 0 represents the peak of the sampling distribution, so it is a likely outcome of if the null hypothesis is true. We're not allowed to say the null hypothesis is true. We're just allowed to say that we can't prove that it's false, right? But we do not accept or try and say that the null hypothesis is true. We just try and prove that we think that it's false or that we don't have enough evidence to say that it's false. Determine whether the statement makes sense or does not make sense and explain clearly. A type 1 error is made when the hypothesis test is conducted using a 0.05 level of significance and a p-value is 0.0 or 0.90. That statement does not make sense. The type 1 error is a mistake of rejecting the null hypothesis when it should not be rejected. If the p-value is 0.090, the null hypothesis will not be rejected. So a type 1 error cannot occur. A type 2 error could occur, but not a type 1 error. Decide whether the statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false. It is always wise to select a significance level of 0 to minimize the chance of making an error. You can't make a significance level of 0. You can't eliminate the possibility for all error. But you can make alpha really small. You just can't make it 0. So that doesn't make sense. So statement does not make sense. With a significance level of 0, the test must always fail to reject the null hypothesis, and the test will never reveal anything about the population of interest. Right, but we don't have a test to conclude if we don't have two options, is what they're saying. So if you have 0 rejection region, you don't have a hypothesis test. So that's it for this video, and we'll come back next time and talk about 9.2 Objective 3. See you for the next video.